Hey everybody, welcome back to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. Today I'm going to be doing a video which is covering kind of a lot of topics. It's going to be mostly talking about protein, but in general I'm going to also cover some other questions regarding nutrition and dietary deficiencies and things like that. And specifically I'm going to talk a lot about this idea that Indians are protein deficient, or other people in the poor areas of the developing world are protein deficient, and whether or not that's a valid or useful thing to say, and also what can be done about it. So I'm going to have some articles to talk about, some scientific literature to go over, and also some examples, just using chronometer and kind of giving some real world examples of what I'm saying. And then hopefully you guys can make up your own minds, and you'll also see why I say in the thumbnail that yes and no, there is such a thing as protein deficiency in these poor people living in India or elsewhere. But yeah, let's get into it. The first thing is that I was sent this article on Twitter, and it was basically saying how Indian people are protein deficient. And as the title here says, Indians are a long way away from an ideal diet. You can see the summary here. Indians eat too much carbohydrates, sugar, and junk, but not enough protein, even when they have the economic means to eat healthier and better. The new recommendations were published last week by The Lancet as the result of a 3-year commission involving a global team of experts. This article is very poorly written. I have several criticisms of it, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But basically, they're talking about the Lancet Eat report that came out, and making some comparisons based on survey data for India as a whole. And they're basically, coming to this conclusion that Indian people are grossly protein deficient. Something like 70, I forget what the percentage is, 73 or 71 or something percent of the people in India are apparently deficient in protein. And they make all these recommendations how people need to start focusing more on protein and eating more protein, etc., etc. And it's not just this one article. Here's another one. Survey reveals 71% of Indians have poor muscle health, and 84% of Indian vegetarian and 65% of non-vegetarian diets are protein deficient. They're really hammering home this point that protein, people are protein deficient. It just kind of goes through again, this idea that people are just simply not eating enough protein, even if they have the economic means to do so. Even rich people living in cities, urban areas, are not getting enough protein, even though they could, and they just don't understand why it's so important, and they're not eating enough protein. Here's another one. Most Indians think protein deficiency is not unsafe. And again, they say 73% of diets in urban India are protein deficient. On top of that, 93% are unaware of ideal protein requirement. And they talk again about the importance of having, protein. Here's another one. 73% of urban rich Indians are protein deficient. Here's 11 high protein foods. If you're watching this and you're a vegan, you probably already kind of know why I'm smiling and kind of laughing, because protein is arguably one of the easiest things to get if you're eating a variety of foods. Anyway, here's another one. India Forbes. Indians are protein deficient and it needs immediate attention. And get protein. And, it's so difficult to get protein. And the usual sources of proteins in the regular diet, 1 cup of lentils, 1 glass of milk, or 1 cup of yogurt contains 7 to 8 grams of protein. But to get the daily requirement of 60 grams every day, it would be necessary to eat 8 bowls of lentils or drink 7 to 8 glasses of milk. And it's this is the classic, stupid thing that people want to, reduce everything into some specific food has only this many grams of protein. Therefore, to get all your protein, you would need to eat whatever. There was a commercial back in the day, in the U.S., I think it was for some cereal. I forget what it was. It was Total or something like that. It's you'd have to eat this many bowls of whatever, some other brand of cereal to get this many, this much of your vitamins or this much of your fiber, whatever mineral, and you only have to eat 1 bowl of whatever because it was a fortified cereal. And this is exactly it. It's like people don't realize it's not just the one thing. You're not only getting protein from lentils. You're not only getting protein from meat and eggs and dairy and whatever. You're getting protein from literally everything you eat. Everything has protein, and everything has all the essential amino acids. Now, I kind of got into trouble with my post on Twitter that started this whole journey into researching this issue for me, because I said as long as you're getting sufficient calories, you're getting enough protein. If you're eating like a whole food, I'm not talking about a processed food. But I was pointed out by a helpful vegan that there are certain foods that have limiting factors. Specifically, lysine seems to be the lowest ranking or lowest content containing essential amino acid in certain foods. So there are some foods that have a slightly lower amount, and you would actually need to be able to eat more than the required calories per day to get your lysine requirement. Now, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but the idea that you can't get enough protein if you're eating enough calories, and if you're not doing some stupid mono meal, like weird, like I only eat rice, or I only eat bread, or I only eat some other food that's low in lysine. This should not be a problem. I'm going to show you guys why. But regardless of that, I want to point out something that pretty much every one of the articles I found, and I looked through a lot more than this, these are just a sampling of the ones that I found, most, if not all of them, were referring to a report that was produced by the IMRB, which is the India Market Research Bureau. And basically, they are a for-profit market research firm. They have a bunch of clients that, I think are pretty unethical, to be honest. They do work for Unilever. They do work for British American Tobacco. British American Tobacco is the second largest manufacturer of cigarettes in the world, as far as I could find, just to give you an idea of their clientele. So make no mistake that this was not something put out by, a well-meaning, bunch of doctors or nutritionists or what have you. This is a market research firm that has put out this report that is then regurgitated across all of these news sites. So this is just a little bit about IMRB. You can go look them up, look up their clientele. I'm not going to waste the time here, but it's a for-profit organization. It has nothing to do with any kind of like altruistic, let's feed people, let's help malnutrition, whatever, just to give you that. And something that I really want to point out is, especially in the first article here, they make a bunch of different errors. I'm not going to go through all of them. They have errors in the labeling of their diagrams. They have misleading or totally incorrect statements throughout the article. You can just read it. It reads like a bad joke, quite honestly. But the thing that I want to point out is that they talk about red meat consumption. And again, bear in mind that this is the IMRB writing the stuff that this article is referencing. And they make it seem at the beginning as if this was put out by the Lancet team. So they have right here at the very top, the bullet point. The new recommendations were published last week by the Lancet as the result of a 3-year commission. Now, the results of this article have nothing to do with the Lancet report, but they're making it seem as if the recommendations here are from the Lancet report. And I'm going to show you guys why that's not the case. Here you can see that they're talking about red meat consumption. They say, while the developed world consumed far more red meat than is good for their health or is environmentally sustainable, North Americans consume 6.5 times the daily recommended quantity. The Indians ate too little at half the recommended levels. Upping the protein intake in India is vital. Now, the reason why I think this is incredibly dangerous and misleading is because they're literally kind of in one way paying lip service to the idea that, yes, people in North America are eating way too much red meat. They're eating 6.5 times the amount of what they call is the daily recommended quantity. I'm going to show you guys what the actual Eat Lancet report says, because there is no daily recommended quantity. There's an optional amount that they list as something that you can consume if needed. It's optional, and it's basically set as a maximum limit, not as a daily recommended quantity. And they literally say Indians ate too little, meaning of red meat. So they're literally telling people that Indians are eating too little red meat, and that upping the intake in India is vital. And again, here it's a very carefully worded thing. There's a difference. They're not saying upping red meat intake in India is vital. They switched back the language to upping protein intake in India is vital. But I think this is very disingenuous and very kind of like a clever little, wordplay that people will miss. You're reading about red meat. You're reading about how the U.S. or, the North America is eating way more and way more than the recommended amount, which is, again, not true. I'm going to show it to you guys in a second. But then they switch the language to Indians ate too little at half the recommended amount. Again, there is no recommended amount, and there's a recommended maximum, not a minimum. And then they switch back the language to upping protein intake in India is vital. It's very, very disingenuous. Here is the actual Eat Lancet report. You guys can download this yourself. It's out there. This is a report that got put out to try to help the world adopt a more sustainable and healthy diet that can feed the growing population, and et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of people have criticized this. I think it's actually pretty reasonable. They acknowledge that many places in the world rely on different kinds of food sources, and including animal sources, and especially in developing areas of the world, it's very difficult to simply tell people what to do and take things out and change them without having a better kind of like economic system and more just like wealth basically to deal with like shortcomings in the food systems. But regardless, they try to put out some recommendations both for health and sustainability. And it's a really interesting report. I definitely encourage everybody to read it. But the thing I want to focus on here is they are basically talking about a healthy diet. They show kind of an example. They literally say here, a planetary health plate should consist of, by volume, of approximately half a plate of vegetables and fruits. The other half, displayed by contributions to calories, should consist of primarily whole grains, plant protein sources, unsaturated plant oils, and optionally modest amounts of animal sources of protein. And then if you actually look at, this is a target that they're listing of, what people should be eating, you can see that the recommended, amounts here per grams for the protein sources, and if you look at the animals, they're all listed as 0 to some amount, and they're giving an upper limit. And they're not saying you should be eating this many things of beef, this many things of grams of lamb or pork or whatever. They're saying you can optionally eat up to this amount. They're not saying you should eat this amount. And in fact, it's very clear here. Healthy diets have an optimal caloric intake and consist largely of a diversity of plant-based foods. Low amounts of animal source foods contain unsaturated rather than saturated fats. Again, the primary source of saturated fats is from animal foods. And limit amounts of refined grains, highly processed foods, and added sugars. Okay, that's fine. Obviously, I think even the most hardcore, paleo, keto, carnivore people agree we should be limiting our, highly processed foods and sugars and things like that. That's fine. Here's an example of some of the, plates of food that they would recommend. This is a flexitarian diet, which is largely plant-based, but can optionally include modest amounts of fish, meat, and dairy foods. And here they do say the transformation to healthy diets by 2050 will require substantial dietary shifts. This includes more than a doubling in the consumption of healthy foods such as fruits and vegetables, legumes and nuts, and greater than 50% reduction in global consumption of less healthy foods such as added sugars and red meat. Again, they know that red meat is unhealthy. It's a probable carcinogen as defined by the World Health Organization, which I've covered before in many other videos. Go look it up if you haven't seen those yet. People know that we shouldn't be eating red meat, but yet you have these articles that are encouraging, basically, people are trying to trick them into eating more red meat. It's absolutely disingenuous. I think the worst example of this that I found was actually this put out by the Poultry India page. This is the Poultry, Association of India, and they are launching a national protein awareness campaign to highlight protein deficiency in the country. I think none of the articles were as bad as this one. But this one basically they're trying to come off as this somehow, I don't even know what, like charitable organization that's trying to help the the fitness and health of Indians. And when it's very clear that they obviously have an agenda of selling, poultry products, eggs and chicken meat, and it's just very, very disingenuous. But what are some of the quotes here? Poultry India will also circulate printed material to retail outlets highlighting the importance of protein and what would be the consequences for the lack of its intake. At 194.6 million, India today houses the highest number of protein deficient and undernourished people in the world. Of this, a staggering 65 million children under the age of 5 are stunted. Empirical data shows that the Indian children are much more malnourished and protein deficient than their poorer counterparts in sub-Saharan Africa. They're talking about how protein can't be stored, you have to get it every day, blah, blah, blah. They're talking about, again, some survey that was done that showed people didn't even know what optimal protein levels were. They go through a whole bunch of stuff, and they're encouraging, people to eat more protein. And here again, they are basically, kind of conflating things and trying to make it seem like it's very difficult to get enough protein, especially from, vegetarian sources. They specifically talk about dal and beans offering, protein and several minerals like potassium and magnesium. The downside is they offer only a moderate at best amount of protein, and that the digestion is difficult and you can only get so much, and how much you would have to eat, it's just not practical, and blah blah blah. And they're just ignoring the fact that you get protein from literally every single thing that you eat. So they give you some examples here. It's really kind of like disingenuous too, because they put everything in grams, and the same can be played out here if you wanted to. For their example, their top example is egg. So they're trying to make it seem like eggs are such a great source of protein. You actually need 2 medium or large eggs to get 100 grams of food weight and to get this much protein. If you just look it up on a nutrition page or whatever, this is pretty much 2 eggs give you 13 grams of protein. So again, for their reference, their example that they're giving you, to get 70 grams of protein, you would actually need to get almost 11 eggs. So it's like, is that practical? Like, are they going to tell people like, oh, don't eat the however many bowls of, dal and beans because it's going to be, so much, food and so much volume of food? Are they going to tell people to eat 11 eggs? I kind of don't think so. But again, it's just really, really disingenuous. And, I just think, it's very obvious that they're like this. It's basically like a marketing campaign to eat more meat and eat more animal products. They have no interest in like helping nourished or malnourished people to actually become less poor and have more food. They're basically just trying to get people who are reading these stupid articles to go out and buy more animal products because they're not getting enough protein, when that is very far from the case. The people who are so poor that they probably have no internet access and they're struggling to actually get enough calories, those people, are they protein deficient? Probably, and I'm going to show you guys some examples of how that could be possible. So here it is. Those who can should add lean poultry, because as little as 100 grams of lean chicken per day will give you nearly half the recommended protein your body needs. Chicken, egg whites, fish have less saturated fat than most red meat. So they're obviously pushing their own agenda. I'm sure if the beef people wrote a similar thing, they would tell you why beef is such a great choice. Maybe not in India. Sorry, I didn't mean to be offensive about that. But whatever. Let's say a pork producer, would have written something similar. So let's get into some articles talking specifically about protein and how it relates to intakes in India. So here's a research paper talking about protein intakes in India. These are all really fascinating reading. I'm going to have all the links for you guys below, so check it out if you want to see more details here. But I just want to go to the summary paragraph for you guys. There's a lot of stuff to go through here. I'm definitely not going to have the time to go through this thing in this one video. But here is the summary. In summary, while the proportion of individuals at risk of a protein deficiency intake is high in rural and tribal adult populations, this occurs against a backdrop of high prevalence of low BMI, sometimes to an extent of 50%. What that means is that 50% of the people in these rural and poor tribal areas are at a low BMI, meaning they're literally not getting enough calories, they're starving. So half of the people that you're looking at in these poor areas are not getting enough calories, they're underweight. Clinically underweight. So, there's a lot of useful stuff in here. Look through the charts, look through the information. There's a lot of interesting reading here, but, they're talking about the amount of protein people are getting, what sources of protein they're getting it from, which amino acids they might be running into, like limitations, not getting enough of. It's really interesting. It talks a lot about the different, kind of problems. But again, the summary is that like it's very obvious that most of these people are actually the ones that are not getting enough protein. They're really underweight. I'm going to show you guys some examples in a second of where this is not a question of really like a protein problem. It's definitely a nutrition and malnutrition problem. Next article here to check out. This one is Lysine Fortification, Past, Present, and Future. This one was put out by the Food and Nutrition Bulletin, Volume 25, 2004, the United Nations University. This talks specifically about lysine being used as an artificial source to fortify cereal foods, and it talks about the history of doing this for farmed animals. And in fact, basically, talks at the end saying like, look, if the Western world is rich enough to be able to fortify our farmed animals with this essential amino acid to promote better growth and muscle development, shouldn't we be able to do the same for poor people throughout the world in the developing areas? And it makes a case that for a temporary result, you could use artificial lysine to fortify grains and cereals being fed to really poor people. But it also talks about the difficulties of doing that in really spread out areas where they don't have like a central source for these grains. It's not like they're buying their stuff from the supermarket. A lot of these people are growing their own, so it's actually very difficult to fortify things. But what did I want to point out here? Yes, there are some interesting things here about the distribution of wealth and calories. So if you look at the gross national product, U.S. dollars per person per year, in places where they have less than $500 per person per year, there's 37 countries that fall into that category. This is in millions, so 2,990 million people live in these kind of conditions. Their food intake, so their calories per day is 2,070 calories per day. Now bear in mind the reference for most men is like 2,500 calories, 2,200. Depends what kind of weight and height and all this kind of stuff you're looking at. But as a general rule, like 2,500 calories, 2,200 calories. That's like pretty much the lowest I've seen anybody recommend. And depending on obviously like activity level, this could be way higher. It could be maybe like 3,000. And it's not hard to see why these countries would be malnourished and why there would be so many people with low body mass index, BMI, and why they might be undernourished or malnourished in other areas. And then they talk about, as the wealth goes up, you can see that the calories go up, the protein goes up, the percentage of protein from animal sources goes up. This is, of course, something I've talked about many times before. Buying meat is expensive. It's a luxury. And for most people, it actually, the poorer they are, the less meat they eat and the less animal products they eat, because it's actually really incredibly inefficient and expensive to raise animals for the purpose of eating them or eating their products. So this is just a really interesting article. They talk a lot again about the amino acid profiles and which, lysine specifically, why it's difficult to get, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, here you can see the different areas of the world and their population and their energy intake. You can see that in Africa, again, in some places they're getting enough, calories. Technically, they're probably getting enough total protein, but their lysine intake might be kind of borderline. But even here, according to this article, most of the places are getting enough, lysine. So it really, like, you have to kind of look at it on an individual country cases, and you can see that some places are below. So I think in this article, the amount that they gave as a minimum was 2,400-ish milligrams per day for lysine. And you can see there are individual countries that are listed where that is not being met. You can see here, I can't even pronounce this country. So de Devere, this one here, what is that, Bangladesh, those are all below the 2,500, and this one's borderline, Nigeria. So very interesting. Again, talks about a lot of different options that could be done. Interesting reading, I recommend it, check it out. This one is an older article from, let's see, what was this? Yeah, 1969. And this one is talking about kind of the revision of protein recommended intakes, revising them downward. So this is talking about some of the changes that were made in like the 50s and how the recommendations were actually lowered because they realized people didn't need as much protein. There's actually a really interesting video by Dr. Greger back in the day, talking about how some of these recommendations were increased, and you might want to check that out. That might be interesting to you. But the interesting thing in this article is they talk about protein absorption and some of the difficulties you might have, especially if you're calorically restricted. So if you don't even have enough calories, even if you're eating enough protein, for example, you might not actually have enough calories coming in to actually break down those protein sources as efficiently. So some of your conversion and use of the protein is actually lowered, so it's impaired. So this just further kind of underscores the idea that in a place where you're not getting enough calories, even if you were somehow getting enough protein, you would actually have trouble making use of all the protein, and you would still have health problems as a consequence. Here, incidence of calorie and protein deficiency. We can further extend the above analysis to estimate the proportion of people whose diets are deficient in both calories and proteins. This is done by calculating the proportion of households with both calorie and protein intakes below their respective critical limits. This proportion is about 1/4 for Madras and for Bihar, 0.5. But then, they make adjustments for this and all this kind of stuff. The point I'm trying to make here is that, can you be protein deficient? Absolutely, especially if you're not getting enough calories. But this is again where something I think that people are trying to be scared with this like protein thing. There's a whole lot of other stuff that you're going to be deficient in if you're actually deficient in protein, and those things are probably far more critical and dangerous to you than the lack of getting enough protein. And I think this is just really something that there's obvious like economic interest from these farm advocates and animal agriculture industries that are pushing people to basically equate high quality protein with animal products when that's not the case. And they're also trying to get people to be focused on protein almost exclusively, even to the detriment of other nutrients and malnutrition. And I just don't think that's right. And then here at the end, I just wanted to point out in the summary is where they also make reference to these new guidelines. So back again, this was in 1969. Where was it? How then, in the light of these findings, can be justified the call to increase production of protein in all forms, irrespective of whether these forms are high or low in calories? This call is based on the widespread belief that the principal deficiency in diets is likely to be protein and not calories, and that infants and children need foods which are much more concentrated in protein than those which are adequate for adults. Great emphasis was placed upon the need for protein-rich foods because the old scales of protein requirements were much higher than the revised recommendations. Again, these came out in 68 and 65, and the old recommendations they're talking about are from 58 and 57. If these new scales are accepted, we must conclude that the children's need for protein can be met with a diet based on cereals and pulses. Pulses, again, are legumes, beans, peas, things like that, such as those normally eaten by adults, provided they take enough of it. There is therefore no particular danger of protein deficiency occurring once an infant begins to take solid food and can tolerate the bulk associated with it without impairing his digestive capacity. Protein-rich foods of high biological value, such as milk and eggs, have clearly a vital part to play in ensuring a smooth transition in the diet of recently weaned infants, and also in providing the nutrition needed during states of pregnancy and lactation. Again, in a place where it's incredibly poor, they have they're on the very cusp of getting enough calories and barely able to survive. Are they going to keep eating eggs from the hens they have in their yards or whatever and drinking milk from a goat? Yeah, of course they are. And the videos that, vegans put out and the message that people put out are not geared to people who are basically subsistence farmers or just living, on the basic borderline of getting enough calories and almost starving to death. We're talking to people who are watching this on probably their phone or the internet, and talking to them and encouraging them to be compassionate and be more sustainable and have live by your ethical convictions of not exploiting animals. We're not talking about people who are starving to death or on the verge of starving to death, or even just on the verge of being malnourished. That's not what the goal of the Lancet report is. That's not what the goal of vegans are. I want to talk a little bit again. You guys can also check out some essential amino acids are actually kind of really high in animal products, and those are actually almost kind of good to limit. So it's actually good to not get too many of those sources. Methionine is one of them. You can check out some videos from nutritionfacts.org about that. And you know, check that out. Check out the high sulfur content of food, all this kind of stuff. It's really like a well documented, well understood phenomena that's not good. You know, this is the post that kind of started this whole research you know, rant for me. Go check that out if you want to see it, and kind of follow the comments there. And this was just something that I wanted to show you guys. It's a reference for height and weight for these kind of recommendations. This is U.S. guidelines, I believe. You can see that for the purposes of kind of making a reference recommendation, the average female is considered to be 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighs 126 pounds. The average reference man is 5 feet 10 inches and weighs 154 pounds. You can see that the calorie ranges for women are from 1,600 to 2,400 calories. Most of the things, you know, split the difference. They call it 2,000 calories per day. 2,000 to 3,000 calories for adult men. Usually, again, I often see 2,500 calories. But again, they also say that, you know, depending on activity level, this can vary, you know, greatly. So it's just interesting stuff to look at. Here's an article talking about lysine requirements. You can see that the recent intake recommendations to meet lysine requirement range from 64 to 30 milligrams per kilogram per day. And basically, you know, if you're pregnant, if you're, you know, like lactating, you know, or if you're a baby, these requirements can be slightly higher, lower, whatever. But, you know, nobody's saying lower than 30, and it seems like 64 is kind of like the upper end of the range that people are recommending. They're also saying that in the Western human diet, the range is usually between 40 and 180, so well, you know, at or above that range. And they're also saying that there's an upper limit. I don't think it's very easy to hit that upper limit, but again, you can, I'm sure, if you're just going crazy and eating like a lot of protein. But I wanted to briefly show you guys some examples to make my point, because a lot of this stuff is very scientific and very dry and kind of hard to understand. And I just figured it would be good to give you guys examples. The other day when I did the live stream about learning Chronometer, I went and logged in and created an account, and you guys can see me kind of poking around in there. But I made kind of just a sample day of something that I actually ate like that particular day. This was pretty accurate to what I ate that day. You can see I had a huge oatmeal breakfast. You can go into the video and see what I put in there. I had a tofu lunch. I had a bunch of fruit and, you know, some cornflakes and pretty much, yeah, like there was like a potato soup that my wife made. And you can see that I pretty much smashed all of my goals for most everything. Minerals are good. Protein is like, you know, way above and beyond what I need. I'm currently about 91 kilograms. So if you look, 91 times 0.8 is about the you know, recommendation for protein. I'm supposed to be getting at least 72.8 grams of protein per day. I got 98.7, so almost 99 grams of protein, way above and beyond. If you look at the lysine requirements, I'm at 4.4 grams, which is 4,400 milligrams. And the amount that I should have been getting is, if you look at the low range, is 30 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So again, 91 times 30 milligrams is 2,730. That's the low end of the range, and I'm at 4,400, so way above the low end of the range that's being recommended. Again, really good at all the vitamins, except for vitamin E. I was a little low, and I think that, again, didn't include some of the nuts and seeds. If you watch my video, you'll see, but I'm not really that concerned. I got everything. Super easy to do, all vegan, no problem. Next, I want to show you guys just kind of like, okay, this person is very clearly like very poor. They have nothing to eat but bread and water. I put in enough calories to get 2,200 calories for the day, or just under 2,200 calories for the day. They're eating literally nothing but bread and water. And I want to show you guys, like, are they protein deficient? Yes, they are. And you can see that even as this, you know, it's a processed food, because it's bread. It's not even just like a whole grain. So that's even worse than if they just ate, like, say, you know, the wheat, probably, you know, in a more whole form. But even with that, they're actually getting overall enough protein but you can see that they're missing some of the amino acids. Now, some of them are really close, like these ones in the 90 range, or even this like 82. It's probably not that big of a deal, but you can see lysine is definitely low. So would this be a problem? Yeah, absolutely, this would be a problem. But the thing that I want to focus this video on is there are way bigger problems than me not getting enough couple of essential amino acids. Look at the fact that this would have 0 vitamin A, 0 vitamin C, and really low vitamin K, really low potassium. I mean, there's a lot of problems that you would be getting, eating just something like this. This is not by any means something that can be sustainable for any real serious amount of time. Like, you would die of scurvy. So, like, protein deficiency isn't what's going to kill you in this case of this extreme, starvation diet. Basically, it's going to be other things like scurvy and other kind of like deficiencies that you're going to run into. I want to show an example of how you could easily kind of modify this like almost bread only diet. You can just add a few basic and cheap, I might add, fruit and veggie kind of options. Again, all vegan options that would actually greatly improve the overall, kind of like health option of this meal. You can see I moved the bread option down. I think the other one was around 800 something. What was it? It was, don't remember how many grams it was. I think it was like 800 something grams. Anyway, I can't remember off the top of my head. But I moved it down to 550 grams of bread. I added half a cup of lentils. I added 1 large pepper, half a cup of butternut squash, half a cup of oats, maybe for like a breakfast with some almonds, 10 almonds, so not like a huge amount, just like a small handful of almonds, 10 pieces. We added 1 onion, a tomato, and a sweet potato, and 1 eggplant to make basically something together with the lentils, and then just split that for lunch and supper with the bread. And you can see that still hitting that roughly 2,200 calories. But now look at the profile. You've got pretty much all of your protein met. I don't know why this is showing 68% for the lysine. Again, I've shown you guys that for the 70 grams worth of protein that I would need overall, it's getting way over that for the overall, and for the lysine requirement, it's actually being met. It might be kind of borderline, it's on the low end of the recommended amount, but it's meeting it. And these foods are all very cheap and very available. And obviously, like, if you're like on the verge of starving in India, I'm not suggesting that, you could just go to the store and buy an eggplant. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just giving some very basic examples of foods that are found in India. People do use these in traditional Indian, cooking, and it's not something that is like, people should be scared into thinking they need to eat animal sources. They don't need to eat animal sources to obtain these nutrients. They could easily meet their protein requirements with these, options that I put in there. And again, look at the minerals, way better than before. Look at the vitamins, again, way better than before. Is it perfect? No, of course not. It's not perfect, but it's way better than it was. And you're not going to be dying of scurvy or vitamin A deficiency anymore. You got plenty of those things. And these are just from just a very, very small amount of foods. And they are, really cheap foods. And I would argue that they're cheaper than animal foods. So again, even if you were like looking at this as a humanitarian kind of option of like bringing food into these places where people are undernourished, malnourished, like, you would still have a better time bringing in some chickpeas and dried oats and things like that than to bring in animal products, which you need to either refrigerate or somehow kill fresh and keep those alive. Where are you getting the food to feed these animals, etc., etc. So these are all things that you can bring in either dried or dehydrated or canned or whatever, and these are just as readily available, if not cheaper, than most of the animal products that you would be using to replace this. You can do similar kind of things with rice only, or some other kinds of things, but you would get the same kind of overall effect. I also want to compare kind of a standard American diet to show you guys that despite what the animal agriculture industry would have you believe, it's not that easy to actually get all of your required nutrition just by eating animal products. So you could be eating a total junk diet, basically a standard American diet, and be deficient in a whole bunch of stuff. If you guys look, I put together what would have been actually, sadly, a very kind of almost typical day for when I was eating at my worst as an omnivore. You can see I was getting probably close to 3,000 calories in a day, and I was still missing several key vitamins and minerals here. You can see that magnesium is low, potassium is low, vitamin C is low, vitamin K is actually low, and that is something that is kind of like one of the things that anti-vegans will love to tout, that you can't get enough vitamin K on a vegan diet. And I can show you the reference food that I ate as a healthy vegan. It's way above and beyond what I need for vitamin K. But this standard American diet day is actually lower than what I should have. So you can see what I put in this day of eating. This would have been like a McDonald's sausage and egg muffin, some hash browns. For lunch, it would have been a pepperoni pizza, and maybe take the leftovers home for supper and eat some ice cream and eat one apple because I'm trying to be healthy. And that would have been the day. That's 3,000 calories. Is it any wonder that, the poor people who are eating, and I don't mean poor financially, I mean the poor people who are eating this food on a daily basis are feeling unsatiated? Because if you actually look at this amount of food, don't tell me you wouldn't be able to eat this. This is not very much volume food. It doesn't fill you up. You don't feel good after eating this. It's just a lot of calorically dense food and fat and oil that's making these things be really high in calories, but you're actually not even like feeling full. After you eat a big bowl of oatmeal with a ton of fruit and maybe some walnuts or something, you feel way fuller than eating just a small McDonald's sausage and egg muffin and a couple of hash browns. That doesn't fill you up. But anyway, so this is obviously like a pretty big problem. You would be getting 3,000 calories. If you're sedentary, if you're not doing a lot of exercise, you're going to be getting fat. You're going to be actually putting on weight with this kind of diet, and you're going to be deficient in these things. And low vitamin C, you can probably get sick easier. Low magnesium, potassium, there's all sorts of problems associated with that. But again, am I getting enough protein? Yeah, no problem there. So another example of a standard American diet, day 2, you can see here again, I'm not getting enough folate, not getting enough vitamin C, not getting enough vitamin K, not getting enough copper, magnesium, potassium. Am I getting enough protein? Heck yeah, 137 grams. Let's see what I put here for this day. Where is it? I had 2 slices of bacon, 2 large fried eggs, had a whole wheat bread, 2 slices, because I want to be healthy. I'm eating whole wheat. I had a big cup of milk. I had a beef burrito with cheese for lunch. I had a white macadamia chocolate cookie, because that's a nice dessert. And I had some yogurt for a snack. And for supper, for dinner, I had basically chicken wings, and I had some celery that I'm dipping into blue cheese sauce. And you can see, again, this is deficient in a bunch of different things. I'm getting way more than I should for calories and fat. Look at the trans fats on some of these things here. This is 10.5 grams of trans fat. You should be getting 0 or as close to 0 as possible, and I've got 10.5 grams. How much did we have the other day? I don't remember. The other day was 3 grams for the first standard American diet day, and 10.5 grams on this one. I put another example here just as a reference. This is 4.5 grams. Let's go in to see what this one is. Again, this was a really high calorie day. This was 3,215 calories. And let's see what I put in here for this day. I had a bowl of Captain Crunch, whole milk, had orange juice because I want to be healthy. I had white bread with butter. I had for lunch a Big Mac and French fries. I also had a big shake because that's tasty, right? And then for supper, I want to be healthy, so I had a tuna salad sandwich with lettuce, and I had a brownie for dessert. Again, not a whole lot of food volume-wise. You wouldn't be feeling good after you eat this. And again, you're deficient in a whole bunch of stuff. Let's go back to there. You can see that, again, fiber, I haven't even talked about fiber, but like fiber is really low on all of these standard American diet ones. I am getting enough vitamin C, interestingly enough. I think it's probably from the burrito and the things that are in the burrito, the veggies that would be in there. And, I'm not getting enough vitamin E still. I'm missing a whole bunch of stuff here: magnesium, manganese, potassium, and zinc. Again, zinc is one of those things that the anti-vegans love to go on about, how it's so difficult to get in a plant-based diet, but so easy to get with eating animal foods. Now again, oh, and actually this is really funny. It would be actually low in cysteine, so that's really odd. I don't know why that ends up being so low, but interestingly enough, you can easily pick omnivorous days of eating where you're getting way above and beyond the calories that you need, and you're still missing out on a whole bunch of nutrients. And if you really wanted to go back, you can actually go back to the bread only day. And if you just look, this is the bread only day. It's under the 2,200 calories. But if we bump this up to be like, say, 3,000 calories, which is again the upper range of the male reference. So let's add some more bread only. But instead of adding the full recipe of 864 grams, let's just add, say, like 350 grams. So I'm hitting, roughly 3,000 calories. And you can see that, again, now I've gotten way more protein, and I'm actually really close now to getting even the required amount of lysine. But again, this isn't really the point, because I'm still going to be dying of scurvy. I'm still going to have vitamin A deficiency. I have 0 vitamin C. So just to sum everything up, basically what I tried to show here is showing the claims that the poor people in India, and in fact even some of the rich people in India living in in urban areas, are protein deficient. This is not being driven by science. This is being driven by basically a marketing research firm who is very clearly pushing a meat kind of agenda and encouraging people to eat more animal products. I don't think that's even a question. The overall point that I want to make here is that you do not need to eat animal products to get enough protein. And it's certainly possible to get people in very poor areas of the world access to foods that are not animal-based, that are plant-based, to meet their protein and nutrition requirements, so above and beyond just protein. And in fact, I would argue that it's far more important to meet those requirements. And especially, I think it's very dangerous to try to get them to meet their protein requirements or any kind of nutritional requirements by eating things that are known and or probable carcinogens. So processed meats are known carcinogens. Red meat is probable carcinogen. And I still want to emphasize again, because a lot of people don't understand, red meat is not just meat from beef. It's not just from cows. It is from all mammals. All mammals, the meat they have is classified as red meat. So pork is still red meat. Goat is still red meat. Lamb is still red meat. Poultry is considered white meat, and I believe fish falls under the same kind of category. But I know for a fact that a lot of people often incorrectly assume that only beef is red meat. That is not true. So, pork is very much also a problem and a probable carcinogen. So the solution to basically dealing with the world's poor and hungry and undernourished people is not to try to get them to somehow eat more animal protein. It's detrimental to their health. It's way detrimental to the environment. It's way more expensive. It's way less efficient. It causes more destruction throughout the world, deforestation, ocean dead zones, all this kind of stuff. It's, just watch some of the other videos that I've recommended in the past or some of the topics I've done. It's not a simple question of, oh, these people are not getting enough protein, we need to just give them more eggs or meat or dairy or whatever. No, there's plant-based options that work just as well or better, don't come with any of the negative things associated with the meat consumption and animal product consumption. And that's the point of this video. So I hope you guys found this interesting. If you did, give it a thumbs up, please. Share it with other people. We do not need to eat animals and exploit their secretions and eggs and what have you to get enough protein. Getting enough protein is actually quite easy if you're getting enough calories from a variety of food, especially whole foods. But again, it's helpful. Use a chronometer or chronometer or whatever it is. I never know the pronunciation, or some similar app. If you're concerned about what you are getting enough of or not getting enough of, you can actually very quickly put together meal plans and see for yourself if you're going to be deficient in anything. And if you're not a vegan, I still encourage you to go look, because as I showed, eating a standard diet is actually, quite possible to be deficient in various things. Now, again, I purposely chose kind of junk food diets. You can certainly put together a quote-unquote healthy omnivorous diet that you would get all of your requirements. And I, have said this before in many videos. I think it was Dr. Greger that I got it from. But if you look at what is killing people today, it's not, generally speaking, any kind of deficiencies. People aren't dying from, these deficiencies from minerals or vitamins. They're dying in excess from the overconsumption of animal products, giving them heart disease and cancer, and that's what's actually killing the most number of people throughout the world. Heart disease kills more people in the world than anything else. The next, I think, thing is basically the next couple spots are stroke and cancer. So it's they're all related to these kind of over consumption of animal products, not associated with deficiencies. Obviously, for the poor in the world, there are very serious problems of malnutrition, not getting enough calories, not getting enough protein, but they're also not getting enough of everything. They're not getting enough vitamin C, they're not getting enough of vitamin A, they're not getting enough of a whole bunch of other things. The solution isn't to basically force a bunch of animal products on them. That's the point of the video. Hope you guys liked it. Please let me know if you disagree or want to point out anything if I made a mistake. Happy to kind of review anything or look at other articles. And thanks for everybody's support. See you in the new video soon. Bye.